I haven't done book reviews in a while, so across weeks 18 and 19, I read 11 books, so let's go over my thoughts and ratings. Pictures of You by Josh Malerman publishes on September 8th, and this is a literary supernatural horror that follows a woman who is abducted after a night out with her boyfriend and is being held captive by a mad artist. This is a slow burn, fevery dream descent into a woman's obsessive nature and madness. With themes of childhood trauma, grief, devotion, loneliness, obsession, I found this story unsettling and very creative. While I thought this was a really well-written story and I enjoyed a lot about it, I was ultimately pretty underwhelmed. I'm a big fan of Josh Malerman. I've rated all of the books I've read by him 4.5 stars or higher, so I'm pretty surprised that I wasn't obsessed with this one as well. I will say I really appreciated how this book portrayed this relationship throughout the story. It's a relatively new relationship, and you get all of the feels of that new relationship while you're also dealing with this panic moment of the woman in the relationship being held captive and the boyfriend trying his best to figure out what happened to her. We also get a lot of a backstory of this mad artist, and I found her character arc very interesting, but for some reason I just really couldn't connect to any of the characters and therefore wasn't super invested in the overall story. I still think that it's a really good book. I just didn't love it as much as I expected to, and I rated it 3.5 stars. The Anniversary by Alex Finlay is a thriller that follows two people who are connected through a serial killer that strikes every May 1st, and I actually read this on May 1st because of that. This kind of reminded me of the premise of Twice on Christmas by McGarvey Black, because we have a killer that strikes once a year on the same date every year, and we're following a character throughout her life and how she's affected by this killer's actions. This had me locked in. I was so invested in where the story was going. It was very entertaining, and it was a lot more emotionally charged than I expected. The characters were so well fleshed out, and I truly cared about each of their journeys and what happened to them. It really felt less like it was trying to shock me, though it did several times. It felt more like it was really trying to foster the connection between the characters and the reader, and I felt that very strongly throughout reading this story, and yeah, it pulled on my heartstrings quite a bit. I'm honestly surprised I love this book as much as I did, because I've read one other book by this author called What Have We Done, and I did enjoy that one, but it ultimately wasn't like a favorite and didn't stick out. But this one definitely did. I think this is going to be one that really sticks with me. I rated it 4.25 stars. Make Me Better by Sarah Gailey is a culty horror book that follows Celia, who travels to Kindred Cove to attend the annual Salt Festival, which promotes inevitable transformation, which is just what she needs because she is down on her luck. Of course, when she gets there, it turns out to be far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. I was obsessed with this immediately. The vibes were immaculate and the characters were so well fleshed out, I felt a connection to them immediately. Now, this is kind of a slow burn and it's not very fast paced. I know people kind of struggle with that sometimes. It also doesn't have typical chapters. They're told in different parts. We're mainly in present day, but we do get some flashbacks to the past. There are a bunch of scene breaks, so it kind of works as chapters, but this is a bit of a longer-winded book. But for me personally, it truly didn't feel that way because I was just that invested in the story. This kind of reminded me of a blend of Nine Perfect Strangers by Catherine Steadman, How Bad Things Can Get by Darcy Coates. So if you like those culty retreat trips gone wrong, I think that you'll enjoy this one as well. Like many culty books, this book has themes of cult-like mindset and hive mentality, blind devotion, and a lot of that like self-help kind of bettering of yourself for the better of the world kind of vibe to it. And while it definitely has a bunch of similar themes to other culty books, I found this one like very atmospherically immersive to the point that I honestly didn't even feel like I was reading a book at times. It felt like I was reading about people that I knew. I don't know how else to explain it. It was very unsettling. I was obsessed with this book, honestly. I'm rating it 4.75 stars just because it didn't give me that 5-star feeling, but I don't know, it might be one that I sit with and later change my mind about and rate higher. The Dorians by Nick Cutter publishes tomorrow on May 19th, and this book is so phenomenal. It is a sci-fi horror book that follows 5 elderly people who sign up for this secretive medical trial to have their lives prolonged and perhaps reversed. This is the second book I've read by Nick Cutter, and while I loved The Troop, I have to say that this one is definitely more my vibe. It was giving Black Mirror-esque thriller meets survival horror. It was so fascinating and bizarre and utterly addicting. You ever hear the premise of a book and you're like, that sounds really good, I hope the author can really bring that to life? Nick Cutter did. This has such a well-developed and complex plotline. The characters are so well fleshed out. They each have their own individual characteristics that make them feel very human. The story not only had me on the edge of my seat, but had me scratching my head and pulled me in so many different directions, and also was an emotional journey. This had such an immersive atmosphere. There were so many tense scenes, and I just really loved this book. I was gonna rate this 4.75 stars, but the more that I yap about it, the more that I'm like, It's a 5-star read. I don't know why I'm so stingy about giving out 5 stars. I just am, but I'm not going to hold back. This is 5 stars. Love You to Death by Christina Dodson is a thriller that follows two Black women who are best friends and they're down on their luck, so they decide to revert to their old ways and crash a wedding. But they show up and this is an antebellum South-themed wedding and they are the only two Black people in attendance. Things of course go terribly wrong, somebody winds up dead, and now these two women go on the run from the law. This reminded me of a mix of the movies Date Night and One of Them Days. I was having so much fun with this. It also definitely has its serious tones and a lot of heavier themes throughout, but it was just a blast to read. The main characters, Kayla and Zori, have this very complicated and intense friendship. There's a ton of history there, tons of manipulation, secrets that they're hiding from one another, and it just really felt like one of those true toxic female friendships that some of us can find ourselves trapped in. This is one that is super easy to fly through, and it had very important themes throughout, such as racial injustice, power imbalance, manipulation, toxic friendships, and so much more. I really enjoyed this read, and I rated it 4 stars. Humboldt Cut by Allison Mick is a supernatural horror book that follows a Black woman named Jazz who finds herself uncovering her family's dark history deep within the Redwood Forest with her family after her grandmother's passing. This is part Lost in the Forest survival thriller, part supernatural family trauma horror, and I really appreciate how these two things were woven together. With themes of deeply dysfunctional family drama, ecological crisis, generational trauma, survival, betrayal, and so much more, this book really packed a punch. While I think that any good horror book has some comedic relief, I think that the dark humor in this one was just so top tier. I thought this was really good. I enjoyed the atmosphere. I just love a Lost in the Woods kind of book, and I really enjoy supernatural elements. I really enjoy generational family trauma stories, and I thought this one was really good. I rated it 4.25 stars. Good Intentions by Marissa Walls is a psychological suspense that follows a woman named Katie who is a party planner, and she gets the tragic phone call that her twin sister Dana has passed away. She rushes to the hospital, and there she encounters a woman named Morgan who lost her son on the exact same day, and she becomes absolutely fascinated by this woman and begins to spiral and obsess over her and just kind of crashes out and messes up her entire life trying to get close to this woman. It's so funny because I was looking at reviews for this book today and there were so many 1-star reviews saying unlikable character, as if that wasn't the entire point. Katie is awful, but that's the point. She is an absolute train wreck of a person and you just can't look away. I do have to get out of the way the fact that I found this incredibly predictable because it has the almost exact same plot line as something that I have seen before. So I wasn't at all surprised by the direction that this book took, but I will say that I enjoyed myself the entire time regardless. If you enjoy stories about obsession and you enjoy lots of toxicity in a person and just watching somebody crash out and make horrible decisions that ruin their life, if you want to be very angry at a person but yet still somehow find yourself rooting for them a little bit, then you might enjoy this read. I definitely did. I will say it's more of a slow to medium paced burn. There's not a whole lot of thrill to it. It's definitely psychological. It's definitely a suspense. Don't go into this expecting a twisty thriller and you'll have a great time. There also is another aspect to the story that I'm kind of having mixed feelings about that I won't tell you what it is because that'll spoil things, but this is something that typically pisses me off, but I feel like the way that it was done in this story particularly kind of gets a little bit of a free pass. I don't want to say too much, but ultimately, I really love this book, and regardless of me thinking it's predictable or regardless of me having a couple of issues with some things, I think this is great. I rated it 4.5 stars. Self-Help for Serial Killers by Asia McKay is the sequel to A Serial Killer's Guide to Marriage. It publishes on June 16th, and this follows our serial killer couple, Fox and Hazel, and they are finding it difficult to balance their very complicated lives of being serial killers and also being parents. They have successfully gotten away with taking out a bunch of terrible people, but their latest victim stirs up some drama, and now there are some very dangerous people after them. I was so obsessed with the first book in this series, so I was very excited to pick this one up and revisit these characters that I loved so much in the first book. And while I did really enjoy seeing them again and getting to know them in this new life that they're living, the plotline itself didn't really work for me. I just don't really like organized crime, and it felt like that was a big bulk of the story this time. Just so different than the vibe of the first book that it kind of threw me off. And then there was also just like a couple of big coincidences that kind of had me rolling my eyes. I don't know. I did enjoy this read, but I was just a little bit disappointed that I didn't love it as much as book one. And I think that that just ultimately like made me dislike it more because I was like, well, it's not like book one. Well, it's not like book one, which is so silly, but I don't know, it just didn't really work for me as much. I'm not sure it's entirely fair to blame my dislike for things that happened in this book on the fact that I loved book 1 so much, but I feel like that's just kind of what happens when you read a book in a series. You kind of compare it to the other books in the series, and yeah, I just did not like it as much as I liked book 1. Ultimately, I did think this was entertaining. I just really liked A Serial Killer's Guide to Marriage much more, which I rated 4.5 stars, and I am rating this one 3.25 stars. It came from Neverland by Cynthia Pelayo, publishes on June 9th, and this is a supernatural horror reimagining of Peter Pan. In this story, we are following Wendy Darling, and she works as a school teacher, and she also takes care of wounded soldiers as they return home. She has this one patient, a man who is absolutely comatose, but one day he mutters the name Peter Pan, and it takes Wendy back to a very dark past. She is convinced that the entity that is Peter Pan is responsible for the unalivings of many children, and when in present day children start to go missing, she thinks that he may be back and that it's finally time to stop him. This is described as It Meets Peter Pan, and if you've read or watched either of those stories and loved them, then you definitely will enjoy this too, because that's exactly what it delivers. In this story, Peter Pan is a dark entity, and this is a dark fairy tale. Wendy Darling is a headstrong FMC that you just can't help but root for, and this is a very fast-paced and tense read that you can just fly through. It's not very long. I really enjoy Pelayo's writing, and I thought this was great. I will say that some parts of it are a little played out because I do know the story of It and I do know the story of Peter Pan, but I thought there was enough uniqueness to the story to really keep me invested and on my toes. I rated It Came from Neverland 3.5 stars. Man of My Dreams by Olivia Worley publishes on June 2nd, and this is a romantic thriller that follows a very popular author named Ivy who stumbles into a man who has the exact same name and description of the MC in her work in progress. No one's read this story except the people involved in working on it, so who is this man? What is he hiding? Is he actually the man of Ivy's dreams? This book is cuckoo bananas ridiculous. This is a popcorn thriller, and it is an absolute snack, if you will. You just eat it up. It's so good. If you can look past the absolute absurdity of it all and how completely unrealistic this book gets, you'll have a great time. I personally don't look for reality in my fiction, so I was able to kind of jump on board. There were like a couple of things that were like, okay, that's a bit too far, but ultimately this was just such a wild ride that I just buckled up and enjoyed the journey. Definitely kept me guessing too. It pulled me in a lot of different directions. The FMC, she makes these really stupid decisions and you're like, girl, don't do that, but also do it for the plot. It's really entertaining to see you do crazy things. I just had a really good time with this. Super, super fun read. I don't know if I'm just in a really good place in life lately and I'm just in a really good mood, or if I truly am just reading banger after banger, but I loved this book. I rated it 4.5 stars. And the bangers continue. Kill Creek by Scott Thomas was recommended to me by the one and only horror author Nat Cassidy. This follows a group of writers who get invited to stay at this infamous haunted house, and they accidentally awaken an entity that begins to follow them and torment them throughout their lives. This is such a multi-layered supernatural paranormal story. The characters are so well developed and they each have their own specialties within the horror and macabre genres. They all have their internal struggles that come to fruition, and the story focuses a lot on confronting one's demons. This was not only psychologically tormenting, but it also had a lot of creepy moments throughout that really had me on the edge of my seat. I also really appreciated the social commentary and the commentary on the writing industry, particularly within the horror genres from the perspective of horror authors. I also really enjoyed the metaphorical symbolism of this house being its sort of entity haunting the people, leaving long after they've gone, forcing them to confront things that they've been avoiding. I have nothing but wonderful things to say about this book. I think that every aspect of it was so well done. I just love a very complex haunted house story that focuses on grief and trauma, with characters that feel like real people and suspense that really just eats away at you. This one knocked it out of the park. I rated Kill Creek 5 stars. My favorite book I read in the 18th week of 2026 was The Dorians by Nick Cutter, and my favorite book that I read in the 19th week of 2026 was Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. Let me know in the comments your favorite books that you read in the 18th and 19th weeks of 2026.